of Waiting for Next of the Evergreen Network. This is your host, Seth, and joining Waiting for Next Year's airwaves, I believe for the first time, you can read his work on Write Down Euclid, listen to him on Locked On Cavs, which I do every single day. Follow him on Twitter at amnotevan. Folks, it's Evan Dammarell.
Thanks for... I'm telling everyone every time I join someone on something, whether it's the guys on the radio, whether it's you, I just gotta hire you all as my personal hype men. So whenever I'm just feeling down, I'm just like, hey Seth, can you hit me up real quick? Just give me a quick pick me up, and then you just list off everything, give me a little round of applause. My ego is satiated. I'm gonna come out of here with a huge brain, just really just feeling it afterwards. But thanks for having me.
Absolutely. That I promise you that intro every time we talk. That's like the bar. It's never going to go below there. So there and better from here on out. So we're rolling.
There you go.
So first off, thank you for joining. And I know we have a couple of things we want to get to tonight. We're going to keep it pretty tight. This is our first time podding together. So just appreciate everyone listening. Be patient with us as we kind of navigate here. But before we get started, before we talk about anything, looking forward into the season, Evan, I have to ask you, what was your reaction when you heard about the Donovan Mitchell trade? Were you like him, where you're on a golf course and screaming and hooting and hollering? What was your initial reaction to that trade?
So funnily enough, I just wrapped up golfing when the Woj bomb kind of broke, and I was off work that day. I was like, I'm taking the day off. Nothing's going to happen. We're going to relax, take it easy. And then I went golfing with my dad, and then I was grabbing lunch with my parents, and the Woj bomb dropped. And I was just like, hold on. And then I had a gut feeling who was involved in it. So I reached out to one of the players' agents, and he's like, yeah, he was traded to Utah. I'm like, okay, cool. And then I pieced together the pieces of it. I'm just like, wow, well, this is kind of big. And my brain just kind of started melting for a second. So I'm just getting overwhelmed with all the details and the overall public reaction to it all. So it was cool, man. And then seeing them in practice together and seeing them just perform together, and you can feel yes, Darius Garland said the vibes are immaculate, but you can really feel it. It's genuine, and yeah, there's something to be excited about with this basketball team. And it all hit right after I got off the golf course, which just makes it even more fun.
Unbelievable. Yeah, sorry. I know that was kind of a random. I had to slip it in because arguably that was the biggest story of the entire offseason. I know you weren't around when we initially kind of broke out and had a few pods. So I had to get your initial reaction to that. It's awesome.
Oh no, you're all good, man. It's like a long trip. There's a lot to unpack when it comes to Donovan Mitchell right now. So it's exciting though. We're gonna talk about camp. We're gonna talk about the preseason. It's exciting stuff, and I think that's what I really said in my article for Write Down Euclid. Just my initial reaction was, there's something to really be excited about here. There's you could just feel it. Even during his intro presser, they had a bunch of fans at Burke, and they had a bunch of fans in the arena cheering him on and stuff. And he's a bit of a man of the people, that Donovan Mitchell.
Very calm, sophisticated, intelligent. He's come off great so far. Before we get into last night's game, the first preseason opener for the Cleveland Cavaliers, I'm going to do a quick ad read from our friends at BetterHelp. It can be tough to train your brain to stay in problem-solving mode when faced with a challenge in life. But when you learn how to find your own solutions, there's no better feeling. A therapist can help you become a better problem solver, making it easier to accomplish your goals, no matter how big or small. If you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option. It's convenient, accessible, affordable, and entirely online. When you want to be a better problem solver, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/WFNY today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/WFNY. So now, Evan, that we got your initial reaction about Donovan Mitchell, wanted to talk a little bit about the first preseason game. So it's one game. The starters played a half. So there's not probably a ton to bite into yet. But, hey, we got to talk about something here, right? Yeah. So real quick, stats-wise, like I said, the starters played a half. Donovan Mitchell, his debut for the Cleveland Cavaliers, 16 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists in 19 minutes. Darius Garland, 12 points, 4 assists in 15 minutes. Let's make it tough. Outside of that duo, if we can go back and forth, what were 3 things that you took away from last night. 3 things that stuck out at you, that you noticed, 3 things that you realized from last night.
So, like you said, the starters only played the first half, and a lot of meaningful rotation guys only played the first few minutes of the third quarter, like Dean Wade and Jetty Osman to an extent. So, there's not a lot to sink your teeth into, like you said, but there are some interesting storylines. For me, the biggest thing that stood out, though, is there is still no clear cut answer at the starting 3 spot. We talked about this on Locked On Cavs a little bit for Thursday's episode, but it just feels like, yes, you saw Karis LeVert start. You saw Isaac Okoro play. You saw Dean Wade play some minutes at the 3 next to the starters as well. Like, you can tell that it's going to be a process, and I am very curious to see how the Cavs have this figured out before the preseason's over, because JB Bickerstaff really emphatically said, like, hey, we're going to have this solved before the regular season starts. So when they roll into Toronto, they know what they're about at the starting 3. And just, I don't know how you feel about it, but it's just like, it doesn't feel like there's a clear cut answer. And I think that's okay. But you're playing Philly a second time, and hopefully you maybe get a little more info out of it along the way.
Yeah, and am I going crazy in thinking that, I mean, the preseason just is so quick now. They play 4 games. It's like you barely have enough time to see anyone. I just recall, from years ago, it being much longer process. You'd have a better feel on different, more time that they would have. And now it's just like, well, you hope people are healthy because you have 4 games at it, and then you're rolling right into the regular season. We're 2 weeks away now, right?
Yeah, oh my gosh, we're actually less than 2 weeks away at this point, by the time we're recording this. But yeah, the preseason's a lot quicker now. It's tricky because this evaluation process is hard. But the only nice thing about it is, and it stinks for my mileage, and I mean, I get reimbursed for gas, which is nice, but like, it stinks for my sleep schedule too a little bit. It's just running back and forth to Independence. But the only nice thing is with preseason is these guys actually get time to practice, they get time to learn, they get time to burn. And I mean, I think that's where the clear cut answer is really going to come, is who stands out the most in camp. And I mean, JB Bickerstaff's a guy who doesn't play his hand at all, but it's a process, and trying to read within the half truths and everything else and try and figure out maybe like what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. Like, I don't think that Dylan Windler and Jetty Osman are clear options to start at the 3, and I think it's like a clear race between Karis LeVert and Isaac Okoro. But hey, somebody could surprise all of us, because a lot of people have pointed out, like, Larry Marketing came off the bench in their first preseason game against Chicago, and then when the season opened, he was their starting 3, which kind of took everyone by surprise.
One of the things that stuck out to me last night, and I don't know if you shared this too or not, we haven't talked about it yet, but just the amount of good depth that this Cavaliers team seems to have. I mean, we all know how big of an upgrade that Howell Neto is over, no offense, Brandon Goodwin was last year when they were really struggling with injuries, and even the backup center spot. Obviously, we were, the Cavaliers were pressed to play Moses Brown significant minutes, and seeing Robin Lopez down there. This is the first time in a while. Obviously, top talent speaks for itself throughout the LeBron years, but just like through guy like 12 or 13, just like, man, they just have NBA dudes, don't they? Just seems like they could go really deep if they get into some trouble this year.
Yeah, so it is an interesting thought exercise, because before they brought in Donovan Mitchell, they had a lot of depth. Like, they had Larry Markin, they had Ochai Agbaji, they had Colin Sexton coming back, whether it was on a contract or the last year of his rookie contract. And then you bring in Neto, you bring in Lopez. Like, you hit the nail on the head, where last season you look at guys like Ed Davis or Moses Brown or Kevin Pangos or Brandon Goodwin, and like, yeah, they were serviceable, but they weren't good enough when you had to call upon them for multiple games when an injury hits, or when COVID kind of hits, you just ravages your roster as well. Like, there's a lot of unexpected things that kind of hamstring the Cavs. And I think just sometimes that back end depth is key. And there were some good things that came with the Cavs kind of getting banged up. Like, you saw Lamar Stevens take a big step. You saw Dean Wade look actually pretty comfortable starting at the 3. And I think that's why he's in the conversation now for the starting 3 spot. And but you're absolutely right. Like, you bring in these guys, but then you trade Sexton, Agbaji, and Markkanen off to Utah to bring in Donovan Mitchell, and you just have so much loaded talent in that, like, your core 4 between Garland, Mitchell, Mobley, and Allen, that you can have one of any of them on the floor at any time. Like, I know JB Bickerstaff has said that they're going to have always one of Garland or Mitchell on the floor at any moment, and you saw a little bit of it the other night against Philly when They played a little bit of point Don off the bench, which worked really well for them, or with the bench unit rather. And now it's just like they have good depth, like you mentioned. Like they have Levert, they have Okoro, they have Love, they have Rubio eventually coming back, and then you have Neto and Lopez and guys like Wade and Stevens. Like they have a lot of good, just like quality, solid depth where they don't really have to maybe run into awkward situations where maybe an injury happens or they rest guys, or even if like just based on situational stuff too, like even Jetty Osmond can get some burn too, where like having Donovan Mitchell kind of like really throws things for a loop. Like you can really just load the back end of your rotation with shooting or defense based on who you're playing.
I was talking to a good friend last night, and we were talking about, to your point, Evan, the options that the Cavaliers have now with different lineups, different players. And I'm like, man, JP's going to earn his salary this year, isn't he? I mean, like last year, the previous years, it was like, okay, these are my 8 or 9 guys. They're going to go play. If one of those get hurt, we'll throw in someone else. Now it's like, oh man, he's got some serious options to toy with. So I'm very interested, and it's kind of one of the things like you said earlier, we're not going to learn a ton. Perhaps JB's pretty tight, plays it pretty tight, but just the amount of different, strategic things that he can do with this team now with that depth is going to be really fascinating. I can't wait to see what him and newcomer Luke Walton, what kind of offensive lineups they're going to put out there.
So JB actually mentioned Luke Walton's going to be helping with the defense and the offense. And I had a reader ask me a question like, what's he going to do? And I'm like, maybe he's involved in guard development because to an extent, Walton did learn some things from coaching the Warriors. I mean, the Warriors kind of played for themselves when he was leading the charge for Golden State while Steve Kerr is recovering from back surgery. But he's had his hand in developing De'Aaron Fox, Tyrese Halliburton, Lonzo Ball, Alex Caruso, just to name a few guys to begin with. Like, he has a pretty solid resume. And, like, if you want to have a guy who wants to work with Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland or even Ricky Rubio or Raul Neto as well. Then you could also have him work with like Lamar Stevens just to teach him like, hey, this is how you can last in the NBA if you want to become like a jack of all trades, master of none kind of forward off the bench, or like in Walton's case, a key piece for the championship Lakers. But yeah, man, like this Cavs team has a lot of fun options, and it's a fun thought exercise too, especially now with Donovan Mitchell here, because you saw success with him playing the point with a unit of him, I believe, Okoro, Love, Levert, and Allen, where you have something similar to what they had in Utah, where you have Allen, who's an elite defensive anchor and is an elite like pick and throw roll option, and Donovan Mitchell's an elite pick and roll ball handler. Then you put shooting next to him, and then a little bit of defense as well, and a cutter and Isaac Okoro, where like you saw that really great play where Mitchell was driving to the basket, and then the defense clapped on him, and he saw a streaking Okoro, and he had the vision and wherewithal to just kind of do the wraparound pass and throw it to Okoro, which is probably the best play of the night against Philly. So it's fun to think about what the Cavs can do. I think this team having an elite point guard like Darius Garland and having like a top 20 player in Donovan Mitchell at the 2 guard spot really accelerates things. But it's a shame we couldn't see Evan Mobley play against Philly. It's a shame he sprained his ankle, but I'm most intrigued by what his upside is because he's really putting an emphasis on like shooting and offense. And if he's a shooter, like this Cavs team's going to be really scary on both ends of the floor.
I was thinking about the lineup that JB put out last night, and obviously without Mobley, they put Love in there, but with Karras, and you think about just 1 through 4 with that lineup of Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Karras LeVert, and Evan Mobley. I mean, all those guys can initiate some level of offense, and then JA is the ultimate screen and get lobs or pick and roll. And it's just, man, the offensive possibilities are just insane. Speaking of that, and I think you and I were kind of hinting around it right there, was if we look at training camp only being, another to your point, less than 2 weeks away, is there a certain, whether it be a player's individual trait or a certain play style, is there one thing that you want to see throughout training camp, i.e., Okoro's, initiating the offense or shooting, slashing ability, or certain play styles where, certain guys are on the court? Is there like one thing that you're hoping to see, or maybe even that you saw last night that you took note of?
Well, before Evan Mobley went down with the injury, because he'll be out through the whole preseason and hopefully plays against Toronto. I was hoping to see is this shooting stuff real? Because he really talked about it during media day, and then one day during practice, like he was just taking standstill shots just around the perimeter with some of the coaches. And then I asked JB, I'm like, hey, do you want him shooting those? Like, are you encouraging that? Like, obviously they are because he's practicing it, but he's just like, yeah, if Evan's open, we want him shooting it. And like, that's kind of interesting to hear because like Mobley showed a little bit of that touch at USC, and it's something that I think like really could unlock the Cavs offense. But since he's out, I just want to see more of, and something I just really noticed is the gravity between Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, because Karis LeVert kind of joked about it. Like Philly plays defense a little less intensely than Cleveland does, at least they have in camp, and they found themselves a bit more open last night against Philadelphia. But Darius Garland, like, saw the defense collapse on him a lot, or he saw somebody throw their best perimeter defender, or their two best perimeter defenders against him that frustrated him, and you saw the offense bogged down. But like, you see Mitchell just moving around the perimeter, and Kevin Love to an extent as well. But like, watching those two feed off of one another, just with the hypothetical threat they have on the perimeter, is just really cool to see, and I want to see more of it. Like, I want to see Donovan Mitchell take advantage of defenses collapsing on Darius, or I want to see Darius being able to pepper the ball on the interior or on the perimeter, other shooters. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff, and I'm just interested to see what else they can do to play off one another, you know?
Well, everyone that's listening knows that Evan and I didn't share notes before we came in, because that is exactly what I had written down, was how Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell were going to play off each other. I was really impressed with how much ball movement there was last night early on. And exactly to what you just said, Evan, the amount of times like Donovan did a little curl and went to the baseline, and just there was just constant body movement in and out. And it's one half. We obviously need to see it at volume, but man, that the offense was moving, the ball was moving, and it was great to just, we got really beaten down, I think, the last 20, 30 games of the last season, just watching pretty much Darius Garland just try to take the offense onto his shoulders. And we knew what was coming, and we knew how they got beat in the play-in was, multiple guys getting thrown at Darius and them begging anyone else to beat him. So the fact of having some gravity elsewhere on the court was just a really cool thing to see, finally.
Yeah, no, it is cool, and it's what you're hoping you would have gotten with Karis LeVert. And then when you look at Colin Sexton on the bench, you're like, this is exactly what the Cavs needed, but they got the ultimate level up on Colin Sexton, in my opinion. I wrote it. A couple other people have said it too. Like, it's a self-idealized version of what the Cavs wanted Colin Sexton to be, is what they have in Donovan Mitchell, is where they have a guy who is a good three-point shooter, but is more comfortable shooting from the perimeter than maybe taking mid-range shots or attacking on the interior. But like, yeah, it's going to be something interesting to see. I'm cautiously optimistic. I think there's going to be growing pains just because Garland's young, Mitchell's a little bit more seasoned, but he expects touches, and I think Garland's going to expect them too. And then obviously you have to feed Evan Mobley and Jared Allen as well, unless those two learn how to initiate an offense and run pick and rolls, which I'd be flabbergasted if that was the case. But it's going to have some growing pains. I think that's just to be expected with a team that just suddenly has star level expectations now. But it's going to be fun when they start clicking. And I really do think, and this is the other thing I'm kind of hoping to see throughout preseason, is can the Cavs find a little bit of balance on offense where like they're dominant on the interior by feeding Jared Allen a lot, and you saw him getting frustrated with Embiid. So it's understandable, and the Cavs took advantage of Philly just kind of letting the Cavs get what they want on the perimeter. But JD's kind of ethos as an offense as a coach is like, let's dominate on the interior so defenses collapse on us, and then we get wide open looks on the perimeter. And if the Cavs can kind of establish that balance, like they're, like I said, really going to be a really scary team on both ends of the floor this upcoming season, rather.
Yeah, one of the metrics I'm very interested to watch throughout the year. Obviously, we all know it that the Cavs were really low in terms of 3-point attempts last season, and it's going to be very interesting to see with Garland and Donovan in the starting lineup where that number goes. They shot a heck of a lot of them last night. I think they were up to almost 41, 42%. They made a lot of them. Kevin, Donovan, and Darius specifically. It'll be interesting to see just where those 3-point attempts are at this upcoming season. Evan, you talked about Evan Mobley's injury. So we have a couple guys with ankles right now. So Dylan Windler, it sounds like he suffered a minor ankle injury. Evan Mobley as well. suffered an ankle injury. It sounds like he had his foot stepped on by Robin Lopez when he was going up for a shot. Any reason for concern? Obviously, we don't know too much until we know how treatment goes. But do you have any reason for concern in terms of the start of the season with Evan, or do we just need to kind of see how the next week goes and see what we hear back from the Cavaliers?
I mean, when JB Bickerstaff was pressed about it after the news was formally broken by the Cavs that Evan Mobley sprained his ankle, Bickerstaff kind of just alluded to the fact, saying like, "Hey, he's going to be fine for the season opener." Like he didn't seem too overly concerned, but obviously included the caveat of, "We'll see how he's feeling in a week or two, and then like ramp up production from there and figure it out." But it's just like I said, it's disappointing because Evan Mobley's just such an intriguing player overall that you wish you could kind of see him play so you can kind of get a better understanding of where he's at heading into year two, because he's physically like just looks different. He looks much more mature, and the offensive stuff is just very tantalizing and intriguing with him, especially when he said, "Yeah, I plan on bringing the ball up and running plays for the offense." I'm just like, okay, cool. I want to see more of this. So
Right.
I wouldn't be too concerned about it. We'll obviously wait to see what the update is. The Cavs are a team that are very patient. They do right by their players, where they will, to the frustration of fans, sometimes kind of drag out the recovery process, but they want to make sure the guys feel 100% both physically and mentally and feel comfortable on the court. So when they come out there, they don't re-injure themselves again. And just in the other vein of things with injuries, like the Dylan Windler news just stinks. Like you feel bad for him because literally, I think the day or two before the news broke that he sprained his ankle, he's like, "This is the first time I've been fully healthy since my senior season of college, which was 4 years ago." And like, he's like, "Mentally, I feel good. Physically, I feel good. Like, I really want to show that I'm an NBA player and I can make an impact with this Cavs squad." And then, like, you hear that news, you're just like, "Man, that stinks." Like, I feel like a lot of people are rooting for Dylan Windler just to see him have success on the court, just because the potential and the idea of him is always there. And I've written about this a lot, but just seeing a guy like just constantly get beat up by injuries, it just makes you think like, man, that's tough.
The article that you wrote, Evan, was so timely because I think you had that article out, and wasn't it literally within like 24, 36 hours you get the report that he's injured his ankle.
Or the afternoon of, I know it was the morning of, because my Dean Wade's article came out that afternoon. And I was just like, oh, man, that stinks. And what hurts even more is Dylan Windler's trainer gave me a shout out on the chase down. And I'm just like, man, I just like was talking about how your client can't stay reliable, and then he gets hurt. And it just stinks. Like, ankle sprains are no joke. And apparently, according to Chris Fugor's reporting, that it was a pretty severe enough where it swelled up pretty badly, and they're trying to get it back under control. But it's just one step forward, two steps back all the time when it comes to Dylan Windler and his recovery.
Yeah. We're, obviously, needless to say, we're pulling for him, man. He's just, I mean, and the tough part is he's a player that the Cavs would really benefit from his archetype. So, not to say he's necessarily challenging for the 3 spot, but he's challenging for potentially minutes there. So yeah, that would have been nice. And hopefully he gets back healthy here. Well, hey, we got one last segment. I know this is something you and I both kind of enjoy to talk about. So we're going to do a little gambling odds segment here. So I went out and picked 3 different future bets. And just for anyone listening at home, legalization of sports betting is coming, right? January 1st, 2023. So you gotta look up, you gotta go on websites, get your glossaries going. You got to make sure you understand what language Evan and I are talking about here. But a future bet essentially is you're making a bet for an outcome that's yet to happen. So you can make a bet to say the Boston Celtics are going to win the finals, and that's going to have a certain odds, as well as the Cleveland Cavaliers. So I went out and took a look at 3 different bets for the future for the Cavaliers this upcoming season. And Evan, I'm hoping you'll share which one you'd be most confident in with the odds that you're getting back. So these are all plus, meaning you bet $100 and the money you get back essentially are the odds. So I'll go ahead and list them off, and then I'm hoping you'll be able to clue us in on which one you like the most. So the first one we have is the Cleveland Cavaliers to win the East at plus 1,500. So bet 100, win 1,500, net 14. Cavaliers to win the East at 1,500. The second is Evan Mobley to win Defensive Player of the Year, plus 1,700. The third is Kevin Love to win Sixth Man of the Year at plus 2,500. So the longest odds. Bet 100 to win 2,500. So I'll run through them real quick one more time. Cavaliers to win the East plus 1,500. Mobley to win Defensive Player of the Year plus 1,700. Kevin Love to win Sixth Man of the Year plus 2,500. What bet are you choosing? Where are you putting your $100?
I'm not going to go with the winning the East one just because I think this Cavs team's ceiling is the Eastern Conference Finals just for now. But I mean, everything can change. Just the East is really freaking good this year, so it's going to be tough. But the Sixth Man of the Year one is intriguing because the Evan Mobley Defensive Player of the Year one seems like the most obvious answer for that. Sixth Man of the Year one's intriguing because Kevin Love was asked about does he think he should have won it? He's just like, no, the Heat made the playoffs and they're one of the top seeds in the East. And let's just say Kevin Love produces similarly to last year. I don't expect the same production, but let's say he puts up similar numbers and the Cavs are like just one of the hottest, best teams in the East. Like I think a lot of the voting may be reactionary to it. So I'm gonna put $100 on the Kevin Love Sixth Man of the Year race. Like I'll put my money where my mouth is. I think the Cavs are going to be one of the surprise teams of the East, even though they were surprising last year, but like they're going to level up, and having Kevin Love just being a consistent bench threat is just going to really vault him up the ladder and probably past Tyler Herro and guys like that.
I love it. I love it. That's exactly where I was going. So bet 100, win 2,500. The reason I like Kevin, and to your point, I think 90+% of people are saying Evan Mobley, Defensive Player of the Year. Sure, great. He's still probably got 8 guys ahead of him, and it's going to take Evan probably another year or two, I think, to get into that annual conversation. Kevin Love, with the added attention of a Donovan Mitchell, Kevin's going to have a lot of open threes this year. So I love that bet too.
Yeah, you kind of saw it a little bit against Philly last night where Kevin Love's just like, you know what, man, I'm wide open on the perimeter. I'm just going to shoot it. Like, because again, defenses have to pay attention to Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell when they're on the floor, and you have that 3-point shooting threat. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun just watching what this Cavs team can do once they kind of. I'm saying like close to the All-Star break, maybe a few weeks before, maybe a month before the All-Star break, when this team really starts firing, and then if they can get Ricky Rubio back in the fold, like the Cavs could curb stomp a few teams along the way and just kind of be that top team in the East again.
Yeah, we can foresee some, I think, 35-point quarters where they just come out and, yeah, Donovan hits 3 threes, Kevin Love hits another couple, Garland hits a couple, and you look up, you're like, what the hell just happened? And it's the old Cavaliers. So, well, we're about at it. We're gonna go catch some Thursday night football, I think. Before we wrap, though, Evan, any last nuggets, thoughts, anything else you want to get off your chest before we wrap and talk again next time?
Well, I don't want to torture you with Thursday night football because apparently it's just as bad as everyone thought it was going to be. No, not really any nuggets right now. I'm just seeing Ricky Rubio practice every day after practice. Like he's drenched in sweat, but he's clearly cutting and shooting. You can see the rust is still there, but I'm excited to see what he brings to the table too. Other than that, Dean Wade's a fun guy to talk to. I think him joking about him being wide open most of the night last night against Philly was pretty funny to hear too. So it's going to be fun. If folks happen to be at the Wine and Gold scrimmage on Saturday in between the Guardians game and before the Guardians game, I'll be there. If you happen to see me, come say, hey, I'm not a stranger. I don't bite. So always appreciate meeting people out and about. So yeah, just thanks for having me either way though.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, thank you all for listening. Thank you. I saw we got some comments in. We'll be sure to read them live next time. I apologize. I botched that. So we'll be sure to engage on those comments next time. We'll follow us here, WFNY Cleveland, at Seth_hoops, at amnotevan. We'll try to, like we said, we're going to try to do this every once in a while. So we'll be back. We'll make sure we publicize it on Twitter. Thank you all for listening. Have a good night.